I stood frozen in the middle of my sister's elegant backyard party, my hands trembling as I held my 10-year-old son Marcus against my chest, the bright red mark of a grown woman's hand still burning across his small cheek, while my own sister screamed at him that he was a cheap little thief in front of more than 60 guests. Around us, my parents nodded in cold approval, completely ignoring the fact that my sister had just slapped a child across the face with all of her strength. They honestly believed they had finally crushed me, that they could brand my innocent boy a criminal just to protect their precious golden daughter. But as I felt my son shaking against me, my heartbreak turned slowly into something hard and cold, because not one of them had any idea that the flashing blue and red lights now turning into the driveway were about to rip their perfect little world straight down the middle. Sharing a story this painful is never easy. But knowing that I am not alone makes all the difference in the world to me. So before we get into everything that happened that night, I want you to tell me where you are watching this from right now. Is it day or night where you are, and what time is it on your clock? Drop your city and your local time down in the comments below. It honestly means the world to me to see just how far our little digital family really reaches tonight. Hello, my name is Claire, and up until that birthday party, I was the kind of woman who always stayed quiet, who swallowed her own tears, and who quietly cleaned up every single mess my family ever made. I am 38 years old. I work as a fourth-grade teacher in a small town just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I am also a single mother, and the most important title I will ever hold in this entire life is being a mom to my sweet boy, Marcus. Marcus is a gentle, quiet child who still believes the world is mostly good. He is the kind of boy who saves his lunch money to buy baseball cards, who waters the neighbor's plants when she is sick, and who once gave his only umbrella to a smaller kid at the bus stop and walked home soaked to the bone. He loves baseball more than anything in this world. He knows every player, every batting average, every season. He was my entire heart walking around outside of my body. And everything I ever did, every cruel word I ever swallowed from my family, I did under the foolish belief that keeping the peace would somehow keep my son safe. I want to take you back to where all of this really started, because to understand that night, you have to understand my whole life. Growing up in our family, there was always a clear order to things. My younger sister Jenna was the beautiful one, the charming one, the daughter my parents Robert and Linda put on a pedestal from the day she was born. I was 2 years older, but I was always the backup. I was the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who got good grades and never caused trouble and never asked for a single thing. I believed for the longest time that if I was just good enough, just helpful enough, just quiet enough, my mother would one day look at me the way she looked at Jenna. But love that has to be earned is not love at all. It is a leash, and I spent 30-something years on the end of it. When I was 18, I got accepted into a wonderful art program 3 states away. I had worked nights at a diner all through high school to save for it. I will never forget the day my father sat me down at the kitchen table and told me, very calmly, that the money simply was not there for me because Jenna was going to need help with her own school in a few years, and a girl like me did not really need a fancy degree anyway. I cried for 2 days. Then I dried my face, enrolled in the community college down the road, and got my teaching license while watching my parents proudly pay for every single thing Jenna ever wanted. That was only the beginning. Over the next 15 years, my parents turned me into the family bank. Whenever Jenna overspent, whenever her car broke down, whenever she wanted a vacation she could not afford, the phone would ring and my father would say the same words every single time. "She is your sister, Claire. Family takes care of family." Over the years, they drained more than $22,000 out of my savings, money I earned grading papers until midnight, and not $1 of it ever came back. When I once gently asked about being repaid, my mother told me I was being selfish and that a real sister would never even count. Then Jenna married Derek. Derek was a successful attorney from a well-off family, the kind of man who wore expensive watches and talked about wine, and my parents practically worshipped the ground he walked on. The wedding they threw for Jenna cost more than my entire annual salary, and some of it, I later learned, came from a loan they fully expected me to help quietly pay down. I smiled through all of it. I held Jenna's bouquet. I told myself that if I just kept giving, kept showing up, kept proving my loyalty, one day they would finally see me. I had no idea that to people like my family, my loyalty was never a gift. It was simply a resource to be used up until there was nothing left of me at all. This year, my parents and Derek decided to throw Jenna an enormous 40th birthday party in Derek's huge backyard, with a catered dinner, string lights, a live trio playing soft jazz, and more than 60 important guests. My mother called me 3 days before, not to invite me warmly, but to remind me to dress appropriately and to keep, in her words, my situation from embarrassing the family. By my situation, she meant the fact that I was divorced and raising a child on my own. I almost did not go. My friends told me not to, but Marcus had spent 2 weeks making a card for his aunt with a drawing of a baseball field on it, because that boy loves everyone, even people who do not deserve a single ounce of his sweetness. So I put on my one nice dress, I combed his hair, and I drove us across town to the most beautiful house I had ever stepped into. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself that for one evening I could simply smile and stay out of the way and let my son hand his aunt a homemade card. I had no idea that Jenna did not want me there as a guest. She wanted me there as a victim. And the trap was already set before we ever walked through the gate. The party was stunning. Crystal glasses caught the warm glow of hundreds of tiny lights. Waiters moved through the crowd with silver trays. Derek had set up a special table near the patio displaying his proudest possession, a framed and signed Shohei Ohtani rookie card worth $3,800, which he had bought as Jenna's birthday gift. It sat in a glass case for everyone to admire. Marcus, being the baseball lover that he is, stood in front of that case with his eyes wide and his little hands clasped behind his back, careful not to touch, just looking at it like it was a piece of the moon. I should have known. I should have seen it coming the moment I noticed Jenna watching my son look at that card, a small strange smile crossing her face. My ex-husband, a man named Greg, was there too, because of course, Jenna had invited him, knowing exactly how it would unsettle me. He stood across the lawn with a drink in his hand, barely acknowledging the son he rarely calls. I kept Marcus close to me, my hand on his shoulder, and I told myself we would eat dinner, sing the birthday song, and slip away early. We almost made it. About an hour into the evening, the music suddenly cut off. The cheerful hum of conversation faded into an uneasy silence. I looked up and saw Derek standing by the glass case with his hand pressed to his mouth in a look of dramatic horror. The card was gone. The case stood open and empty. Jenna let out a loud gasp and grabbed Derek's arm. He raised his voice so the whole yard could hear. "Everyone, please, listen. The Ohtani card is missing. It was right here in this case 2 minutes ago. That card is worth nearly $4,000, and it means the world to me. I need everyone to please stay exactly where you are." A nervous murmur rolled through the crowd. People began looking at each other, looking at their own hands, looking around the patio. My stomach twisted, but I assumed some careless guest had picked it up to admire it. I bent down to straighten the collar on Marcus's little shirt, and that was when I heard the sharp clicking of high heels stop directly behind me. I turned around. Jenna was standing there, my parents right at her side, Derek looming behind them, and Jenna was looking down at my son with a cold, satisfied gleam in her eye. "Jenna, what is going on?" I asked, my voice already shaking. "What is going on?" my sister said loudly, loud enough for the nearest tables to turn and stare, "is that your little boy was standing in front of that case all night staring at it like he was planning something. Where is the card, Marcus?" I felt my whole body go rigid. I pulled my son gently behind me. Jenna, he has been right next to me this entire evening. He never even touched the glass. He would never take anything. Do not stand there and lie for him, my mother snapped, stepping forward with her arms crossed. We all saw how he was hovering over that case. We all know how he is being raised, with no father in the home and no discipline. I did not take it, Mom, Marcus whispered up at me, his eyes already filling with tears. I promise I did not take it. I just liked looking at it. Before I could say another word, Jenna lunged forward and grabbed my son's small jacket, the one hanging over his arm. She did not ask. She did not wait. She shoved her hand into the front pocket, and with a triumphant little cry, she pulled out the framed Otani card and held it high in the air for the entire party to see. The whole yard gasped. Somewhere near the back, a woman said out loud, "What a little thief!" Derek's mother, sitting at the head table, sighed and shook her head as if she had expected nothing less. My ex-husband Greg simply turned away, refusing to even look, as though my son were a stranger to him. I stared at that card in my sister's hand, and my mind began to race. Marcus had been standing beside me the entire night. His jacket had been draped over his own arm where I could see it. There was no moment, not 1 second, where he could have opened a glass case, removed a framed card, and hidden it without me seeing. And then I caught my sister's eyes. For just one heartbeat, the outrage dropped away from her face, and what was left behind was a cold, mocking, satisfied little smile. That was the moment the truth slammed into me like a wave of ice water. Marcus had not stolen anything. Jenna had taken that card out of the case herself and slipped it into my son's pocket, just to humiliate us, just to brand my 10-year-old boy a thief in front of everyone she wanted to impress. I opened my mouth to scream the truth, to expose her pathetic little setup right there in front of all of them. But I never got the chance, because what happened next broke something inside me that will never fully heal. Marcus, still crying, looked up at his aunt and said the only thing his sweet, honest heart knew how to say. He said, "Aunt Jenna, I did not do it. Somebody put it there." And my sister, in front of more than 60 guests, drew back her hand and slapped my 10-year-old son across the face as hard as she could. The sound of it cracked through the quiet yard like a branch snapping. Marcus's head whipped to the side. He stumbled back into me, and then he simply stood there, frozen, his small hand rising slowly to the bright red print blooming across his cheek, his eyes wide and stunned, the tears spilling over silently because he was too shocked even to make a sound. For one terrible second, the whole world stopped. Then I dropped to my knees in front of my boy and pulled him into my chest, and I felt him begin to shake, deep tremors running through his little body. I looked up at the circle of faces surrounding us, and I looked straight into my mother's eyes, waiting, begging, praying to see a grandmother's horror, a single flicker of shame. I saw nothing. I saw nothing at all. My mother stepped closer to Jenna and patted her daughter's arm gently, the way you comfort someone who has been wronged. She looked down at me holding my crying son, and her face was smooth and calm and completely empty of anything human. Jenna had every right to be upset, my mother said, her voice as level as if she were discussing the weather. You brought a thief into your sister's home. You brought this shame on all of us. She was simply defending what is hers. You did this. You brought this on yourself, Claire. My father nodded in firm agreement beside her, crossing his arms over his expensive sport coat. Take the boy and go home, Claire. You have ruined your sister's birthday enough. Jenna did what anyone would have done. Derek's family stood right beside them, murmuring that the situation needed to be dealt with quietly so the party could go on. And my ex-husband, Greg, the boy's own father, said nothing at all, just lifted his drink to his lips and looked at the lawn. In that exact second, with my son trembling against me and my own parents defending the grown woman who had just struck a child, something inside of me died and something else was born. The quiet, forgiving, obedient woman who had spent 38 years begging these people to love her died right there on that patio. My tears dried up. A strange, terrible calm spread through my whole body, cold and clear and absolutely steady. I looked at my sister's smug face and at my parents' frozen stares, and I understood at last that my kindness had never been a virtue to them. It had only ever been weakness for them to feed on, and I made a silent promise, kneeling there on the stone, that not one single person standing in that circle was going to walk away from this night the same as they walked in. I stood up slowly. I wiped my son's tears with my thumb, and I took out my phone, and with my hand perfectly steady, I dialed 3 numbers, 911. My parents stared at me as if I had lost my mind. Jenna laughed, an ugly, disbelieving sound. "What are you doing?" she said. "Put that away. You are embarrassing yourself." I held the phone to my ear and I looked her dead in the eye while it rang. "I am reporting an adult who just assaulted a 10-year-old child," I said, loud enough for every guest in that backyard to hear. "And I would like every one of these people to be witnesses." The whole party went silent. Derek's expensive friends suddenly looked very uncomfortable. A few of them quietly began gathering their things. The operator answered. I gave the address. I told them, in a flat, calm voice that did not shake even once, that a grown woman had struck my young son across the face in front of more than 60 witnesses, that there was a dispute over a stolen item, and that I needed officers to come right away. My mother hissed at me to hang up the phone. My father told me I was destroying this family over nothing. I did not even look at them. Within 15 minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled into Derek's long driveway, their lights flashing blue and red across all that perfect landscaping. 2 officers walked through the gate and into the yard, and the crowd parted around them like water. Derek hurried forward at once, smoothing his jacket, using the smooth, confident voice of a man used to talking his way out of things. "Officers, I am so sorry you were called out here. I am an attorney. This is just a small family misunderstanding over a missing collectible. We have it completely under control. There's really no need." I stepped right past my brother-in-law and walked directly up to the officers. "I am the mother of the victim," I said, looking straight into the small camera clipped to the lead officer's chest. My sister struck my 10-year-old son across the face with a closed hand in front of this entire party after falsely accusing him of theft. My son is shaking and his cheek is marked. I am pressing charges and I want a full report. Jenna stepped forward, her voice rising into a shrill panic. "He stole my card, my husband's card. I found it in his pocket myself. Everyone saw it. He is a thief." My mother and father chimed in right beside her, swearing to the officers that Marcus was a troubled child, that he had a history, that none of this was Jenna's fault. They lied with such smooth ease that for a moment I almost felt the old fear rise up in me. But I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply turned to the officers and to Derek's housekeeper, who was standing nearby, looking pale and frightened, and I asked one quiet question. "Derek," I said, "does a house this beautiful have security cameras?" The entire yard went still. Derek's face changed in an instant, the color draining right out of it, and I knew before he even answered. I turned back to the officers and I pointed up at the small dark lens mounted under the eave of the patio, angled directly down at the glass display case. "There is a camera right there," I said, "and it has been pointed at that card all evening. I would like everyone here to see exactly what it recorded." Derek began to stammer. "Now there is no need to. That footage is private property, I do not think." The lead officer looked at him evenly and said that if there was video evidence of an assault on a minor, he would very much like to see it, and that refusing would not look good for anyone. Derek's housekeeper, terrified of losing her job over a crime, quietly offered to pull it up. We all moved inside to Derek's home theater, the officers, myself with my son's hand in mine, my parents, Jenna, Derek, and a crowd of guests pressing in at the doorway, whispering. Derek's housekeeper connected the camera feed to the enormous screen on the wall, and with shaking fingers, she rewound the footage to the start of the party. The whole room watched in breathless silence as the video played in crisp, clear color. And there, on that giant screen, for every single guest to see, was my sister Jenna. The footage showed her walking up to the glass case while everyone else was distracted by the food. It showed her glancing around to make sure no one was watching. It showed her carefully opening the case, lifting out the framed Otani card, and crossing the patio to where my son's little jacket hung over the back of an empty chair. And it showed her, plain as day, sliding that card deep into his pocket, then smoothing the jacket and walking calmly away. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Then the room exploded. Guests gasped and cried out. Derek's mother pressed both hands to her face, and Derek himself turned slowly to stare at his wife, his face white with shock and something close to disgust. "Jenna," he said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "you planted it. You put it in a child's pocket, and then you hit him." Jenna's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in her life, my sister had nothing to say. The smug confidence had drained completely out of her face, leaving only the small, ugly truth of who she really was. The two officers did not waste another second. They walked straight up to my sister, and the lead officer informed her that she was under arrest for assault on a minor and for filing a false report. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs closing over her wrists in the middle of her own 40th birthday party was, I will admit, the most satisfying sound I have ever heard in my entire life. When my parents realized that their golden daughter was actually being led out in handcuffs, they completely fell apart. My mother grabbed at my arm, weeping, begging me to make it stop, telling me to think of the family name, telling me that Jenna had made a terrible mistake, but that she did not deserve this. My father, the proud man who had spent my whole life telling me I was not worth investing in, stood trembling in the corner as his important friends filed silently out of the house. I looked at my mother, and I gently pulled my arm out of her grip. "You told me she did what anyone would have done," I said quietly, "so now she can go and do it in front of a judge." The officers warned my parents that if they continued giving false statements, they could be charged as well for obstruction, and that the body camera footage already showed them defending an assault on a child. For the first time in their lives, my mother and father had no power in the room at all. They simply stood there, ruined, while the people they had spent decades trying to impress walked out the door without a backward glance. Derek did not look at me. He looked at his wife being walked to the patrol car, and then he looked at the empty case, and then he looked at the floor for a long time. 3 days later, I learned that he had filed for divorce. He told a mutual acquaintance that he could forgive many things, but that a woman who would frame and strike a 10-year-old boy just to look important in front of his family was not a woman he could ever share a home with again. That was the night I stopped being afraid. Marcus and I drove home in silence that evening, and halfway there he reached over from the back seat and took my hand, and he said, "Mom, I really did not take it." And I had to pull the car over because I could not see the road through my tears. I told him I knew. I told him I had always known. I told him that none of it was ever his fault, not one single bit of it, and that I was so sorry it had taken me so many years to finally stand between him and the people who were supposed to love us. Today, the mark on my son's cheek has long since faded, and the boy is back to being the bright, gentle, baseball-loving child he has always been. He still collects his cards. He still gives away his umbrella. He still believes the world is mostly good, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure nobody ever takes that from him again. I cut off my parents completely. I blocked their numbers, I changed my own, and I have not spoken a word to them since that night. Jenna is facing her charges in court. Derek's divorce moved forward, and my son and I now live in a small, bright, peaceful home where no one is ever made to feel like they have to earn the right to be loved. Looking back at that night, I have come to understand that sometimes walking away from your own blood is not cruelty. It is survival. I spent 38 years trying to buy the love of people who were willing to sacrifice my innocent child just to protect their own pride. But the truth always finds its way into the light, and watching my sister led out of her own birthday party in handcuffs taught me that justice, when it finally arrives, is worth every tear it took to get there. I chose my son. I chose our peace, and I would make that same choice again 1,000 times over without a single moment of regret. But now I want to hear from you. Do you believe I did the right thing by calling the police on my own sister that night? Was I too harsh, or did they leave me no other choice? Let me know your honest thoughts down in the comments below. And if my story moved you in any way, if it reminded you that you are never required to set yourself on fire just to keep other people warm, then please take a moment to subscribe and tap the bell so we can keep growing this family of ours, one brave story at a time.